Good morning, third graders. Our targets for today are I can identify area, array, equal-sized group, and repeated addition story problems. And I can represent area, array, equal-sized group, and repeated addition story problems using pictures and equations. Let's quickly review each of the story problem types that we've learned so far this year. Our first problem type was area multiplication, where you're finding the total square units covered by an object. You know in an area problem there's some kind of rectangular object. We know how long and wide the object is, and we're trying to find the total square units or the total area of the object. To solve an area multiplication problem, we multiply. Some key words that let us know a problem is an area multiplication problem are, of course, the word area, some kind of length like inch or foot or centimeter, the words long and wide, because we know length and width are what you multiply to find area, square unit, and some kind of rectangular object. The next type of story problem we learned about this year was array multiplication. And in an array multiplication problem, there are physical items that are arranged into rows or columns with the same number of items in each row or column. You're trying to find the total number of physical items. To solve an array problem, you multiply. Key words that let us know a problem is an array problem are the word row or per row or in each row, sometimes the word arranged or organized to show that we are arranging the items into rows, and of course there will be some kind of physical item. It could be a cat, or it could be cats, or it could be cars, or it could be candies. It could be any item, physical items that you would actually put in rows. The next multiplication story problem type we learned about this year is equal-sized group multiplication. In an equal-sized group multiplication story problem, there are physical items that are organized into equal-sized groups. So there's usually some kind of container like a bowl or a cup or a box or even hands, and there are physical items organized into each container with the same number of items in every container. To solve an equal-sized group multiplication story problem, you multiply. Some key words that let us know a problem is an equal-sized group problem would be the word in each or per. There will be some kind of container, like a bowl, for example, and some kind of physical items that are in the containers, like candy. And sometimes we'll see the word equal or total or the same. The last multiplication story problem type we've learned about this year is repeated addition multiplication. And of course, you know, even though it's called repeated addition, we multiply to solve it. In a repeated addition problem, there's an action that repeats itself again and again exactly the same way, often over time. To solve a repeated addition problem, like we were just talking about, you multiply the action times how many times it's happening. Some key words that let you know a problem is a repeated addition problem is that there's some kind of action like making or buying or running. There's some amount of time or how often something happens like days or weeks or times even. We might see the word in all, we might see the word total. And there's also usually the word each to show that the same amount, the action is happening the same way every time. So third grade, now that we've reviewed the 4 multiplication story problem types, we're going to look at some multiplication story problems, and you're going to use the key words and your understanding of the problem types to determine what kind of problem it is. Remember, your choices are your choices are area, array, equal-sized groups, or repeated addition. Ready? Here we go. Jalasia cleaned her room and organized her shoes into 2 neat rows with 8 shoes in each row. How many shoes does Jalasia have in all? Right away I noticed some key words that are helping me know the problem type. I see that she organized her shoes, and shoes are a physical item, into rows with 8 shoes in each row. Well, if we're organizing physical items like shoes into rows or columns, what kind of problem is this? Absolutely. This is clearly an array story problem. Here's our next problem. The deck at Savion's house is 8 yards wide by 10 yards long. How many square yards is the deck? Think about the key words we're seeing in this problem. One keyword I'm noticing right away is yards wide and also yards long. We're talking about a length and a width. I also see the question says how many square yards is the deck. So it's asking me to find the total square yards. And I know that decks can be rectangles. So if we know how long and how wide this deck is and we're trying to find out how many total square yards it is, what kind of story problem is this? You're right. This is an area multiplication story problem. Here's our next problem. Each time Mia draws, she uses 4 pieces of paper. After drawing 4 times, how many pieces of paper has she used? What are some key words that are helping us figure out the problem type in this problem? Well, I see that Mia is using 4 pieces of paper every time that she draws. So every single time she draws, she's going to use 4 pieces of paper. And I also see that she does this 4 times. So the first time she'll use 4 pieces of paper, the second time she'll use 4 pieces of paper, the third time she'll use 4 pieces of paper, the fourth time she'll still use 4 pieces of paper. So I'm seeing that there's an action happening again and again exactly the same way. What kind of problem is this? You're right. This is clearly a repeated addition problem, since Mia's action using pieces of paper is happening again and again and again the same way. Take a look at this problem. You're going to solve this one totally on your own. We're not going to look at the keywords together. You'll just think about them in your brain from here on out. Here's the next problem. A small school bus has 8 rows of seats. Each seat can hold 3 kids. How many total kids could fit on a bus? Well, I noticed some key words once again. I noticed that we're talking about seats on a school bus and that there are Here's our next problem. A small school bus has 8 seats. Each seat can hold 3 kids. How many total kids could fit on a bus? Well, I'm seeing that there are 8 seats with 3 kids being held in each seat. Well, since the seats are holding kids, I can see that the seats are a container holding the physical item kids. And I'm trying to figure out how many kids there are total. If I have physical items, children, being held in containers, seats, what kind of problem is this? You're right. This is clearly an equal-sized group problem. Now, from here on out, we're not going to look at the keywords together. Instead, you'll just think about the keywords in your mind and choose the problem type. Here's our next problem. Mrs. Logan needs a new tablecloth for her 6-foot by 7-foot table. What will the area of the new tablecloth need to be? What kind of story problem is this? You're right. This is clearly an area story problem because we're trying to find the area of the 6-foot by 7-foot tablecloth. Here's our next problem. How many total cookies did Isaiah have after he bought? Here's our next problem. How many total cookies did Isaiah have after he bought 6 boxes of 8 cookies? You're right. This is clearly an equal-sized group problem because there is a container, boxes, holding cookies, a physical item, with the same number of cookies in each box. What about this problem? Ziona spends 5 minutes brushing her beautiful hair each day. How many minutes does she spend brushing her hair in 1 week? What kind of problem is this? You're right. This is clearly a repeated addition problem because the action Ziona's doing, brushing her hair for 5 minutes every single day, happens again and again in the same way for 1 week or 7 days. Here's our last problem. The librarian is sorting the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books into 3 columns with 7 books per column. How many Here's our last problem. The librarian is sorting the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books into 3 columns, with 7 books per column. How many Diary of a Wimpy Kid books does the librarian have in total? Ooh, I thought this one. What kind of story problem is this? You're right. I thought this one might trick you because it says columns instead of rows, but you know that rows are just columns that go up and down. This is an array problem with physical items, books, arranged into columns. Thank you for solving. Thank you for identifying these 4 multiplication story problem types with me today. Before we go, I want you to remind me. How would you solve all of these problems, whether they're area or array or equal-sized group or repeated addition? What would you do to solve them? Would you add or subtract or multiply? You're right. To solve all 4 of these types of problems, we multiply. Have a great day, 3rd grade.